All right.
Cool.
Well, we can go ahead and get started then. So thank you
Sounds
to
good.
all the people who are here now and who are watching later. And nice to see you, Macgill. So I guess why don't we just start off with some basic introductions. So I am Ben Skinner, and I am one of the co-founders or co-presidents of Jumbo Ventures, along with Tom Yang. Jumbo Ventures is a program here at Tufts where it is an 11-week program. And if you join it, we will take you from start to, not to finish, but through the first few stages of starting your very own startup. Macgill is actually one of our mentors. So if you want to apply for our program in a future semester, you will possibly have a chance to work with him. And it's honestly just a super cool program. So make sure to stay tuned for any kind of application updates about that. So that's about me and Jumbo Ventures. Macgill, so you are a graduate of Tufts University. What a class were you? Were you?
So I actually never fully graduated.
Really?
But
Okay.
I was class of 2014 and I'm still just a few credits short. I left to work on my first startup back in 2015. Yeah.
That's actually cool. Yeah. Tom and I were.
Yeah. But
Yeah, Tom and I were talking about that. We couldn't tell if from your LinkedIn.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I should probably flag that somewhere.
Yeah, cool. Well, all right, great. So we have a few questions that Tom and I wanted to ask, and then after that we can open it up to anybody else here to ask their own questions. But I guess we can just go ahead and get into those. So let's start off talking about your current company, Rize. So for people who have not heard of it, what does your software do? What led you to found it? And just like talk a little about that experience and what that's been like so far.
Sure. So yeah, I co-founded Rize just over a year ago in September 2020. The company is an intelligent time tracker that improves your focus and helps you build better work habits. So we sort of compare it to like a fitness app, but for your productivity. It's purely B2B, purely B2C. And so basically, we just sell directly to consumers. It sits on your computer and tells you how much focus time you're getting, how many breaks you're taking, what your top interrupters are, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, it's been going really well so far. We started working on it in September. We launched publicly in May. We hit profitability in June, and we're just sort of scaling the business, continue to scale the business. We're still bootstrapped, and it's just the two of us. So it's sort of different than some of my experience in the past.
Well, yeah. I was researching it a bit online, and my big takeaway is just the feedback of people who have used it online has been so overwhelmingly positive. It's like it's crazy how many people are just posting things that like this is an amazing product. This has like changed my life and productivity habits. So people who have not checked it out, I recommend you check out Rize. I was using it earlier, and it's very cool. Clearly
Awesome.
well
Thank
designed,
you.
well made. Cool. So then,
if anybody wants, we have a student discount too. So feel free to hit me up, and I'll add a jumbo discount on top of that.
Yes, love that. Thanks, Miguel. So then one thing that was super interesting to me is that so you've worked as a software engineer, then at some point you left that job to work on your own company. So I'm curious kind of about that like transition there, and what motivated you to leave that job and create a startup. So kind of what your entrepreneurial goals were there.
For sure. So I actually started my first company when I was at Tufts. When I was studying computer science at Tufts, it was a startup called Guide Hire. That was part of the reason I left Tufts. We raised a very small amount of money, and we ended up like selling to a fly fishing company in Boston. It's sort of a long story, but after that, I worked. I got a job as a software engineer at a startup called Peer, and that was acquired by Twitter. And then from Twitter, I left with my co-founder to found my second company, which was called Humble which we had to shut down in 2020. But I would say, being at Twitter as a software engineer, I spent just about a little more than a year there. It was an awesome experience, and sort of, I think I guess this is to say, part of the reason what inspired me to go leave it is that I did have some entrepreneurial experience in the past. And I definitely had that desire to start another company, because of how the last one hadn't been a full success. And so I wanted to definitely throw my hat back into the ring. I think I'd also say I sort of learned that, at Twitter, I was on a path to become a really good engineer, but I knew that I wanted, in that stage of my life, my early 20s, and even now, I knew I wanted to optimize sort of growth and learning over making money. And so I knew that that was more risky, but I knew that, and I think a lot of people say this, that like going down entrepreneurial path, a startup path is one of the fastest growth curves that you can find in any career. You're just really thrown heads deep into everything, and the responsibility completely, the buck lands with you on everything. And so you're forced to really learn and grow in so many different ways. And I think that was what really drew me as well, is I felt like I wanted to start optimizing for that growth as soon as I could.
Circle, yeah. So then as a follow-up to that, it seems like working as a professional software engineer, you would really learn a lot of technical skills and get much more professional and better at writing code, basically. So I'm curious to what extent you feel like that experience as a paid developer was essential to then being able to create your own professional product, or if you feel like that was a step you could have skipped. So basically, were you prepared to really, create your own startup from a technical standpoint prior to working as a software engineer, would you say?
So I'd say, yeah, I think that's an interesting question. Like, I don't think it's essential to have an engineering background or to work as a professional software developer to start a company. And I actually would argue that, it's actually becoming less and less essential with the way things are going. Like there's this, explosion of no code tools, more developers than ever before. Like it's easier now it's still hard to build a great product, but it's easier than it ever has been before. And so I think and I think that is the stage where being a software, understand, not even being a software engineer, but just like understanding how to code is really helpful, is those early stages, because you can, it enables you to build that first product, get those first users, create that for free, right? Because you can just do it yourself. And I think that's where it's been extremely, extremely valuable in my career and helpful. But I think I think that is changing. Although I still think it's easier if you do have a technical background and you hit on those early stages, right? But everything, I think, being a good software engineer means you're good at software engineering, you're good at building, or maybe not like building good products, but that is, once you start a company, it ends up being really one sliver of everything you need to get good at, especially as the company grows. So like at these early stages, when you have an idea and you're just trying to bring this concept into the world or test it, right? The product is so important and having those skills are so important. But right when you move beyond that, there's so many other important skill sets that are arguably much more important, especially at these later stages, like hiring, marketing, sales. And these are things that I didn't learn at all through engineering and just had to learn really by doing in these first companies. So I think it helps in the early stages, but like it's not essential. And there's so many things that are going to be valuable once you get going down this path.
Awesome. Well, then let's turn our attention to talking about school a bit. Obviously, all of the people here are college students. So my next question then is, what do you view as having been the most helpful parts of your college experience during your entrepreneurial journey? So was it classes? Was it making connections? Was it being parts of clubs? Something else? What was the most critical and most helpful part of your college experience?
Yeah, I think I would say when I came to Tufts, I was wanted to be an international relations major. Computer science wasn't on my map at all. And I think that's definitely one of the most valuable benefits of going to Tufts, is that I found computer science and really became a passion of mine. And I still love software engineering and building products. So I'm very grateful for that. I also, obviously made great friends, but I would say like most of my professional connections I really met outside it in the real world, because you all end up doing different things. But I think that is the real benefit of college, or what I would recommend to you all, and to myself then, is that just it's less about building your career now. It's more about just discovering what you're passionate about. So like, and trying as many different things as you can. And I'm grateful that I was able to do that a little bit. And I've tried a lot of things that didn't stick. And I was an investment banker for a summer. That was worst summer of my life, but it's valuable to know what you don't like too, And so, yeah, I think that the benefit of college and where you can get the most out of it is just finding what you're passionate about, finding what you like. And that just entails, trial and failure,
Great. Okay, yeah. So then this next question is kind of changing gears again. So one thing I've found in college is that there are a lot of people, both alumni and professors and fellow students even, who offer advice about what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, how you should spend your time, all of this stuff. And oftentimes there's so much advice coming in, so much of it's contradictory. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what a good strategy is navigating advice from all of these different people. So do you have any meta advice, kind of advice on who we should take advice from and how to reconcile all these different things that people are telling us?
I love this question, because this doesn't stop after college. Like this, when you start a company, I'm sure you guys have been reading literature on startups and talking to people, and like my co-founder and I would laugh about this. We would go for fundraising or building a product, building, hiring, creating cultures. For every piece of advice we found, like someone else would tell us the exact opposite, conflicting advice. And so it's just, it's hilarious. It really doesn't, it never ends. But basically, I think to that, I would say, first, try and understand the why behind every piece of advice. Like, I think that's really crucial. If someone can't explain the why behind something, then it's probably not valuable, and you're not going to be able to judge it unless you know why, right? Once you have that context, it's really going to be up to everything is context dependent. It's going to be particular to your situation. So if you get conflicting advice, understand the whys behind both of them, and then it's up to you to do that critical thinking and say, in my situation, what applies to me. And like that's really important to do, and it's hard because in some ways I think advice can feel like safe. Oh, this is what I have to do. It's laid out for me. But unfortunately, that's just never the case. And having conflicting advice along the way is a huge part of that. I can give a quick example. Is like when you're starting a company, right? You'll get so many different pieces of advice around fundraising or what your go-to-market should be, right? But you need to understand, okay, I'm fundraising as a college student in Boston. So maybe this fundraising advice, it doesn't apply to me, because this guy who wrote this is like, a 40-year-old San Francisco developer, right? Like, those are completely different environments and profiles that you're pitching from. Or this advice says go out and pitch all these big companies through cold email, but Rize is a B2C. We target, is that really how any consumers are going to find out about our product, right? And so like you're going to have to just like take the advice, understand the why, and then filter it to apply to your situation. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's like any great meta advice there.
Sure, yeah. Wonderful.
Other than it doesn't stop.
Yeah. Okay, so you have experience founding multiple startups now. And I think a lot of people here are probably aspiring entrepreneurs and will, at some point down the road, found their first startup. So I'm curious, as somebody who has experience founding more than one startup, what is the difference in the experience between your first and second one? And what do you wish that you would have known when you were starting your first startup that you have since learned?
Before we move on to that question,
Okay,
there's one thing that I did just come to mind around the advice aspect that I would recommend, particularly I think in a life sense, but particularly in a startup sense, is if you can test it, then test it. Like, you really learn things. And I think this is like what I've definitely learned in my career is that, but particularly in the startup and entrepreneurial space, is like, just do it, try it out. If there's any way, what's the smallest test you can make on any of this advice and see what works for you? Like I also love, morning routines and personal productivity. That's like a passion of mine. And it's another space where there's a million pieces of advice. They're all conflicting, but I just try all these different things and compare it and write notes. And like you can do, it's amazing at how much of many things in life you can actually apply that to, because you learn through doing. That is 100% what I believe. Okay. I just wanted to say that before it slipped out of my mind and never remembered it again. So this question was around what have I learned between the first and second company?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a great quote that says, first time founders obsess about product, second time founders obsess about distribution. And I think, I don't know who said that, maybe Paul Graham or something, but I think it is 100% true. And I would apply that 100% to my experience. So the most important thing, I think when I was building the first product, I was a software developer. The nature of how we developed that first company was we just started building this product that we wanted to see exist in our free time, and just ended up getting users, and it sort of snowballed into this company. But it failed because we did not have this clear, customer profile, right? This clear value prop that we were trying to solve. And the second company, Rize, we started completely in the opposite way. We started market first. We started problem first. And so, and we figured out what was our problem we're solving, who was the customer we're going after, what was our, like, the rough idea of, our go-to-market, and what was our rough brand going to be. So it was like reversed. We did that before we figured out our market and our customer before we actually settled on the product. And obviously you learn and it's changed, but those were our first steps. As compared to the first company, we built the product first and then sort of tried to find the market for it. And I think that's 100% what I would wish I knew in 2017, is that figure out the problem you're solving, figure out like who is the customer, what's the value prop you're providing, who are you solving this for, and what is the market, and if it really needs to be built for that, right? Because you can build an amazing product in a market that people just don't need or just don't want or won't pay for, and you won't be successful. You can build a horrible product that barely works. I mean, we use LinkedIn all the time, and we're still on it. It's like the worst product out there, right? But they've been successful because, they made it work. So like focus on distribution, on market, on customer profile, really on what problem are you solving? That's really where it stems from. And then you can just go from those following steps. This is the problem I'm solving. This is who I'm solving for. This is the market I'm going after. And this is why I believe it's a growing market, and why the existing solutions don't fit. Which is, I think I was reversed from where we were at in the past.
One thing that I find interesting. Oh, sure, yeah. So,
no, I just think that's a common mistake that a lot of software developers and product people do, and it's a common mistake for first-time founders, because so many of them are software developers. We're so geared towards building, and we're just excited about building, that we don't spend enough time asking and talking about, like, is there enough demand for this? Is this worth building for, or is this the right thing I should be building, for the right person?
Right.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is that Rize is obviously not the first productivity software that exists. So I'm curious what your thought process is involving how you view the fact that there are other productivity softwares that are like, some are more or less successful. Do you view that more as like, this is a crowded marketplace that's harder to get into, or do you view that more as that's proof that there is a lot of demand for this kind of thing? And what's your thought process like there?
That's also a really good question. I think so. It really depends. Like you don't want to go into a crowded market if you don't believe there's any fundamental shifts happening, right? Or if you believe that the profile or niche that you're going after is already being satisfied. if you're like building a product and your value props are exactly the same as an existing one, and you can tell that their brand is similar, it's like, well, that's going to be tough because you're going after exactly the same people. But when I look at the time tracking space, that's like Rize is like the high level time tracker. It's a very crowded space on the surface, but when you dig in, you say, okay, but almost 90% of these time trackers are actually automated timesheets for like freelancers or for agencies or law firms. They're not built for individual productivity. They're just built for recording your time for billable hours. So let's cut those out. Once you do that, there's really two products out there that target individuals and are geared towards productivity. And Rize is one of them. And the other one is Rescue Time, which has been around for about 12 or 15 years and sort of has plateaued as a product. And we felt that there was a huge opportunity around the growth of deep work. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with deep work. It was a book by Cal Newport, and basically talks a lot about just like focus and how rare a skill it is, or how challenging it is to get that, the time and space to get focus and deep work done, especially in the current environment that we live in. And a huge amount of this research that's proven out over the last years is that productivity has plateaued. Despite us, productivity, we worked 30% as a workforce in the United States, 30% more last year for no additional productivity gain. And so, why is that? We're working more and we're getting less done, or getting the same amount done, right? And we felt like this is just a huge problem that is going to be that more and more people are going to be concerned about and thinking about and wanting to address. Like, we really do think of ourselves like a fitness app, where so much of fitness apps have come in response to quantifying your health data to help make you more healthy, because our society became extremely unhealthy over the last 50 odd years or more, right? And like, I think there's a really strong parallel there between what we consume, our diets physically, but also like what we're consuming through our screens and our attention wise, right? And so if there was an equivalent of an obesity epidemic online, it's like it's the health epidemic. It has to do with focus and productivity. And so like, we did the research on the market on that side, but then we also felt like, looking at the market, there was really a space for our niche, which was not this, a time tracker that really highlighted on quantifying your focus time and helping you build better work habits. Yeah, that's a super long answer. Probably went too deep in on Rize, but what I guess to say is, it's crowded. It can be crowded from a certain angle, right? But you really just need to start by satisfying a niche. And if you can satisfy a niche better than anyone else, you can build a successful business. And with all startups, how they get Facebook, didn't become $1 billion. Stripe didn't become $1 billion company by being everything they are today. They started with these really small niches. They built a business on that, and then they expanded their market. And you just continue to do that. And you never stop. I mean, that's fundamentally what having a successful business is. So just like, start small, find your niche, and then you grow on that after you succeeded.
Lovely. Great. So one of the kind of first units in our Jumbo Ventures program is guiding people through the process of finding a co-founder for their startup. There's a lot of research around the success of companies with like one founder versus two founders versus five founders, and I think it's interesting that you have worked with the same co-founder on both of your startups, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm wondering what your perspective is on both what people should look for when they're finding a co-founder, and then also what a good kind of partner or team dynamic is when you have a team of people working together on a startup.
Okay, so what you should look for, and then what was the second part of it?
And then once you've created that team, what is a good way to like communicate and work together with?
Mm-hmm.
What should that teamwork look like, basically?
Yeah. So I think, again, I mean, well, at first I'll say, like, your co-founder, if you end up, there's some successful companies who have solo founders, and I give them a ton of credit. I mean, I think it is really hard. I mean, not trying to start a company without a co-founder is like, it's a totally doable, but you're playing in hard mode. If you can find someone or multiple people to share the load, like it is just, I mean, there's so much more than just the support that you get in building the company. Like it is an emotional roller coaster being a founder, and no one else will experience the ups and downs like you will as a founder. So having someone to be able to talk to and share those experiences with is really helpful and important, and has served an incredible value and benefit to me. I'm so proud of the relationship I have with Will. Like he's just a great friend, a great co-founder, and that we were able to navigate, having a company that raised millions of dollars and had to shut down. We had to lay everybody off, like go through that horrible experience and come back and, start this new venture that's been like really successful. I'm really proud of that. It's one of the most proud things I'm most proud of, I think, in my career. So yeah, I think it's really important. Like this having your co-founder is key. And in fact, I believe the numbers are the number one reason startups fail is because of co-founder disputes. So like this is stuff that you want to really put the legwork in before you commit to having a co-founder. In terms of finding one, this is something I don't know if I can give a lot of advice. So Will and I, we worked together at this startup called Peer that was acquired by Twitter. And then we worked together at Twitter. We got lunch. We started building HumbleDot, our first company, sort of like on the weekends and weeknights. And then we became founders together. So we had this sort of working relationship. We were friends. We had experience working together. So we weren't really, I mean, granted, starting companies completely different, right? Like than just working alongside someone, you're gonna be tested in a lot of different ways. But we had good rapport going into it. Searching for someone who I haven't worked with is like that I think would be a lot harder. I think if you can somehow do a hackathon or do a side project with them, and like, you'll probably be able to filter bad fits quickly by doing it that way, right? Like getting some experience working together somehow would probably be important before committing. Like I wouldn't just meet someone and start building a company together. I think that's like marrying someone on the first date, but I do think just like the most important traits between a relationship would be one co-founder, multiple. It's just, I think communication is really important. Constantly communicating about everything, about how you feel. I also think having clear roles is also important. I mean, like, since we made an agreement really early on, like I was the CTO and Will is the CEO, and like we've never disagreed on anything. And if there was a tiebreaker, it was going to go to Will, right? We never disagreed on anything, but like it's important to have that resolution early on rather than later on in that stage, because it's just about setting expectations and having that understanding. It doesn't mean that like that the CEO has to do more work. You're each going to carry the load equally, but it's like, it just is going to help resolve. Had I wanted or expected to be CEO, that would have been a huge sort of like issue down the road. So I think it's important to try and resolve certain roles within the company too, once you're ready to commit, just so that you're sure you're on the same page about everything, and try and work out as many of these issues before diving in, because it's never a good idea to kick the can down the road. Like it's that same with equity split, right? And I also would advise, if you're splitting equity, just split it evenly, especially if you're just starting the company. Like we've always done that, and I always recommend that. And I've seen in the past some founders be like, well, I'm technical, so I think I deserve 70%. It's like, it's going to be such a slog. And if both of you don't feel equally invested, there's going to be resentment there, So yeah, I guess in sum, it would be communicate a lot and try and figure out your roles firsthand, and try and set expectations around. I guess that ties to roles, but sort of like what you're expecting from the company.
Cool. So I have a couple more questions that are more kind of personal things, and then we will open it up for a Q&A for anybody in the audience. So just a few more things. First, This is a question that I really like a lot because I think it can give insight into people's kind of like what's going through their head. I'm curious if you have some kind of like a life philosophy or some kind of thing that you just consistently like rely on when you have to make a tough choice.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think for me, relationships are really important. Like I think that in life, like that's definitely one of my core life philosophies is just like if you manage the people, like if you care about and invest in the relationships, the people that care about you, you're gonna get that in return. And it will help you through the best of times and the worst of times. So like for me, I think about being a good son, a good brother, a good boyfriend, and a good friend. Like that is always important to me, and that's less on the business front. That's just life. I know if I do those things, that like no matter what happens to me, things won't be terrible. And I really believe that like if you do invest in and care about people, that you'll get that back twice fold. And you'll be able to navigate any ups and downs. That's the really important stuff, like that beyond your career. On the career front, I think a life, or I guess another life philosophy. That's also not. This is not particular to career, but sort of second in that. It's like I'm very much in favor of don't overthink it and just do it and try it. Like I think, I joke about with so many points in my career, so many times starting companies, like if I had known how hard it was going to be or all the things that were going to go wrong, like I wouldn't have done it. I would have stayed at Twitter, or, I would never have like left Tufts. And so just like I be partial to action because you can always overthink things, right? And don't worry, you'll never have enough experience. You're never going to be ready, right? So just dive in. Yeah, I think that's really a big one. And then I think too, the other life philosophy is just if you can take a long-term view, you will be successful, which is so much. I mean, it's incredible of how much our like society and people are thinking in terms of like 3 months, 6 months, a year, maybe, right? But if you can guide and structure your life in like, year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, just like rough ideas. It's harder when I think you're in college, but there's certain higher level aspects I'm sure that you can focus on. You're playing a whole different ball game, and like success and happiness is like it's really attainable. And that's one more too, which is just reflect a lot, because I think I learned this in life like probably too late. I wish I'd learned it earlier, but if your head's down working, competing, like being productive all the time, like you're gonna end up living a life where you don't even know how you got there if you're happy, if you're doing the right thing. So it's important to take action, but it's also important to just take time, however often that is, every quarter, every year, every 6 months, and just validate that you're living the life that you want to live, and that you're living by the values that you want to live, that you're surrounded by people that you want to be surrounded with. That's really important. We get so caught up in just being heads down, I think we forget to do that.
Love that. All right. My next question is, are you wearing 2 Apple Watches?
That is a great question. Yes, I'm wearing an Apple Watch, and I'm also wearing a Whoop. So a Whoop is a different type of fitness tracker that tracks. I say this is for since we take a lot of inspiration from fitness trackers for Rize. I say this is like for product research, but I'm actually just obsessed with quantified self metrics. But yeah, I highly recommend the Whoop. I promise this is all I have for trackers on me. Everything you can see here. My sister calls them my shackles. She might be right.
All right. Awesome. So I just have one more question, and then we'll open it up for the Q&A. So my final question is, as somebody who has engineered an entire productivity app, you've presumably thought a lot about productivity and researched productivity a lot. So I'm curious, do you have any productivity tips for a bunch of busy college students who don't seem to have enough time on their hands?
Yeah. I mean, I would say But for productivity, and maybe as in life, there's all these hacks. They don't work. There's three really important things that that you should focus on, which is eating well, getting enough sleep, and like hydrating and exercise. Eating well and drinking well, getting enough sleep, and exercise. If you do those three things, you are going to be way more productive, which is honestly probably the opposite of how I live. I think I didn't check any of those boxes in college, so I don't blame any of you for doing that, for not either. But that's really the core. Like those are the three most important things for productivity. Once you get beyond school, it's like sleep, diet, and exercise. They'll also just make your life better. Like you'll just be happier and healthier. But in terms of productivity, I think a huge, and I'll hammer like what a big inspiration behind Rize, because I think that's a major issue. It's, you know, our brains are so scattered all the time now, and actually having the ability to just like focus on one task at one time is like really challenging for a lot of us, because social media, our smartphones, like the way that we are constantly getting notifications, it rewires our brain. And so I would highly recommend, like, if you want to be productive, don't like, it's about finding the most important thing to work on, focusing on sitting down, focusing on getting that done, and then moving to the next the next most important thing to work on. And just, if you just do that over and over again, it is incredible how much work you can get done. Because yeah, you are able to just work so much more quickly when you monotask as opposed to multitask.
Fantastic. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So now let's open it up for the Q&A for anybody here. So if you want to ask a question, just go ahead and you can raise your hand and we will, yeah. All right, Victor, you're up.
Awesome. Thanks so much. First off, I just want to say thank you for giving this talk today. It's been really awesome to listen to kind of your journey and your thoughts and stuff like that. I have two questions. I guess, first of all, I should kind of introduce where I'm at. I know a lot of people here are undergrads. I'm actually a Tufts alum who's currently working as a software engineer. I came back for my master's, but I'm technically still a jumbo. I don't know, whatever. But
yeah.
Anyway, I kind of resonate with your story about being a software engineer, and I feel like, you know, I've done a lot of research before this, and I kind of have an idea of a product and kind of a market to go into. I guess the first question I have is, how do you know when to jump into it? Because as soon as I, you know, quit my full-time job and I'm not making any money.
Yeah.
So, and obviously if the product you make is a success, then you're set. But if it's not, then you're broke, and you also didn't work on much for the past years or so, which probably isn't great.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, when do you know? I mean, when is the right moment financially?
It's, yeah, this is tough. I mean, for me, so first I'd say when my co-founder and I, we had the lucky experience of like, we had gone through this acquisition at Twitter. So we were able to have some money in the bank that enabled this. So like we had that benefit, and I think it's not having that is difficult. And I would say, so yeah, let me think about the best way. Okay, I would say first, the timing might never actually be right, but I would say do as much as you can while you still have this full-time job. That's what we did, and it was really helpful. But it's also really exhausting. So I don't think it's always sustainable to work two jobs. But if you can build that first iteration of the product, get some early users on, like you might learn even before leaving your job that this isn't, you know, there's nothing there, right? So ideally, you can kind of just like work your ass off and for 6 months, right? And then let's say once you have some early product, you have an early product, maybe some early users, then you can either dive full-time in or do some, like one of the benefits of being a software developer is you can actually you have a lot of flexibility in making money. You can do contract work for like 20 hours, 10 hours. I actually still, since we're bootstrapping Rize, I still do contract work every once in a while just to make some extra money. And so that's like a really valuable skill set to have, and enables you to have a lot of flexibility. And if you have questions about that, you can send me an email after this. I'm happy to help, like, give some more advice around engineering, software contracting. But then the other option is if you decide that, like, that's really helpful, because when you start a company, it's going to take way longer. Everything takes longer and everything is harder. So you're probably like, the budget is probably not enough, and making some money on the side, if you can initially, will be helpful. Or if you feel like it's a really VC backable idea, going out and trying to raise is also another option, which I recommend. But having those early customers and that early product as a first-time founder are really, really helpful. It helped us a lot when we raised a bigger pre-seed round when Will and I together.
Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense. Like
yeah.
working for,
I hope
yeah,
that
working
answered your question.
at the same time, yeah, working your ass off, that resonated. I got that.
Yeah.
But no, I know what you mean, and yeah, it's never really a good time. So that's
yeah. But I think if you can build the first iteration of it, like, and get some early users before you leave the job, it was really hard. That was one of the hardest 6 months for us, because you're just like so torn and you don't have any time. And the last thing you want to do when you get home from a software engineering job is code, right?
Yeah.
Like, but it can give you a huge leg up when you do decide to make the jump.
And that leads into my second question. How do you identify users? You know, like, okay, so you have a demo of the product, but how do you actually get people using, besides, like, you know, your family and some people you can kind of pester into
Yeah.
using it?
I mean, this is where I think it all comes back to doing that research up front of what is the problem you're solving, what's the value add, because that should ideally lead you to your customers, right? Like, if you know, okay, well, I'll just go with Rize as an example. Like, we're building an app that helps you get more focus time, right? So there are people who are like knowledge workers who are struggling with getting this focus time. And so where do those people hang out? Oh, there's all these different productivity Discords and Reddits. Maybe we went there for our first users, you know? And so, like, ideally understanding the problem you have will allow you to identify your target customer. And once you know your target customer, you just need to figure out where that profile of person hangs out. Where do they consume their information? Where do they find out about new tools, especially in the context of your problem?
Makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
For sure.
Hey, Macgill, Ben has asked a lot of good questions. I've been just sitting on the side, but
yeah,
I do have a quick question regarding, you know, you talked about your co-founder, you have a very distinct roles that are split up. And I know you said you guys both came from Twitter, so I'm assuming you guys are both, you know, technical. So I'm wondering, you know, once that role is split up within the company, are you guys both working on it on the technical aspects, or is it more of a divide between, you know, getting users growing and then the technical? Because I'm, you know, I actually have debates with Ben about this a lot of time, but I'm currently taking the same CS classes, but I don't plan on pursuing the CS major. So, you know, I'm probably more approaching it from the non-technical side. And so I was wondering, you know, is there a role for someone who's, like, you know, slightly technical, but not trying to be the builder?
Definitely, I would say. I mean, well, for Will and I, we're both technical. We both build product. We kind of both do a little bit of everything. Like, our roles are really, we sort of share all responsibilities for the most part. But I think as the company grows, we know, like, there are, and that was different when we were a team of 10 at Hubbledot versus just us two, you know? So earlier stages, you're just going to be sharing the load completely, but things do tend to divide as more people get added. I think there's a huge, first, I would say, it basically always is helpful to have a technical understanding, even if it's not what you do. It just helps communicating with product. If you end up working in marketing, sales, it helps across the board to have, even if it's not expertise, it's always nice to have that basic understanding. But no, I mean, growth, which is marketing and sales sort of as an umbrella, like, that is just as important as product. And so that is one of the, I think, and that is a skill set that's going to be, it's growing in importance. Like, I'm in all these forums for bootstrap founders and VC founders, and, like, the top question that all of these founders have is, how are you getting customers? How do we get new customers? Where are we finding our customers? Like, that is the biggest problem, because the way the market shifted, and I sort of touched on this earlier, but, you know, 10, 20 years ago, your biggest challenge in a technical startup was probably building a reliable product, right? It's still really hard to build a reliable product, but it's easier than ever before. And so the downstream effect of that is that you have more products than ever before. So there's more noise, right? It's easier to build this, like you can build a product in a day and get it out live to users. So now the challenge is sort of shifted in how do I break through the noise? How do I, reach these users? How do I get people to use the product? So, thinking a lot about that and having a technical understanding, even being able to like have some technical skills to help in that. Like if you're a marketer who can build a website or a landing page or work with some of these no-code tools, that is going to make your life so much better because you're not bottlenecked by engineering, for example, So yeah, no, I think there's huge opportunity there. Definitely recommend it.
Yeah, well, going off of that, then what do you think, is some of the skill sets that require you or that you need to be good at this side of getting users, getting marketing? I mean, there's such a concept, right?
Yeah, I think there's so many paths it's hard to say exactly, and it's sort of dependent because, for example, sales is like a very particular role that's technically growth, but it's a particular skill set. You're like cold calling, or you're having people cold call you, line up meetings, you're doing the same pitch, and it's all about really persistence and like understanding human psychology and having that rapport with people, but also just being able to do the same thing over and over again. Marketing is a lot about, it's like sometimes that's even closer to product research, where you're understanding pain points and like sort of being able to articulate them in an easy to consume way. Like it's growth is so, I mean, it's so broad. There's so many roles. I think if you can be like some of the marketing skills around understanding like digital marketing, really being able to articulate pain points, those are much more valuable at an earlier level if you're building like a consumer startup, right? But if you really want to start, if you have like a B2B app and you're trying to make sales and that involves talking to people a lot, like those are also really good skills to have. And I know a lot of successful companies who are founded that way. So I think it's very dependent on, sorry, I think this is not a great response, but on sort of like what you want to achieve, what path you're going down in growth for those different skills.
Oh, appreciate that.
But I think maybe you just learn by doing. Like if you guys are working on a startup together, I would say, who's our customer? What's the product? How is the best way to reach that customer for this product? And then getting a big understanding of all the different ways that you can grow is really important first. There's a book that was actually recommended to me. I can't remember the name, but if you email me, I can find it. And it just like outlines all the ways that you can get users. And I just read that book and it was really helpful to just get a huge lay of the land, especially coming from like a product side, not having as much insight into that. So I would maybe start there, just understanding all the ways that you can get products and then get users and then filter down to what applies in my situation. Take it from there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much. I'll hand it back to Ben.
All right. Anybody else with any final questions? Going once, going twice? Nope. Okay, cool. So then that wraps up our event. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to Macgill for giving this wonderful talk. This was super helpful. We'll be posting this recording on our website, so if you guys want to check it out there, again, you are free to. Also, reminder to apply for Jumbo Ventures next semester. Macgill is one of our mentors, so if you guys sign up, then you can work with him as a personal mentor, which is very, very cool. So that's it. Thank you all for coming, and thank you very much to Macgill once again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks.